Welcome to our book reading of Kwame Shakur, his autobiography. We're going to start off today. My name is Letty. I'm from the Northern Nevada Brown Berets. And we're going to start off with our statement of unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. All right. So the legacy of the first Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords and Young Patriots organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton, of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated at the end of the day, "We weren't engaged in a race struggle," he said. "It's a class struggle, God damn it." By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities the white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule and subsequently used the entire repressive forces of the state, police courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We founded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle and dare to win. Hashtag all power to the people and hashtag boots on the ground. Our members of the coalition are the New African Black Panther Party, the White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, the Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, Fury, Feminist Uprising to Resist Inequality and Exploitation, NASO, which is North Alabama School for Organizers, and the New Era Young Lords. Our 6 disciplinary rules. Members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2, members will be sober when on the Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4, Members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5, members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And number 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. You guys wanted to talk about chapter 13?
Yes, sis. I was looking to see who all we had on here.
Okay.
Sister Anna, I see you.
Hey, how are you, sis?
I'm good. I am good, sis. So we were just saying we could do like a little recap of the last chapter that we did, chapter 13, Me Against the World. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I find that that particular chapter is one that I could say that I left more into, my journey as a revolutionary, because when it comes down to conditions that we are faced, we have to search for ourselves. And it's not so much of those external factors that define us, but what we are and who we represent in our fight for liberation, or who we are in our roles. And I find that, as far as chapter 13, it was very, I think I wouldn't say intense, but it really was an eye opener, because it really have you to think of, the things in your past that makes up your personality, that makes up your character, and as far as what you need to do in search in life, what your purpose, what your stance is. And it just brought about how I was awakened from, being more conscious with political education, with how our system is run in America, that's not for the common man, is for greed and my intake or my feelings about capitalism, where I find that it was one of the most foul system that was ever created, because there's no way that I see as a Black woman, I'm getting any kind of form of reparation. And I say this because of the classes, and the classes will always keep us suppressed. And this, reminds me, of what Kwame was talking about, being in prison, where he had to face solitary confinement, and he, had to take a reality check. This is what my life is about? This is the end? As he sit, in jail, and find out all of his rights was taken away down to human rights, where it doesn't exist, being incarcerated. So in a nutshell, that's what I looked at, in which it really, it is really one of the thought-provoking a chapter that I have read, and I will leave remembering what this brother have gone through in his journey in search for answer, truth, and meaning. Sister, what is your intake in regard into chapter 13?
Sure, sis, I can add to that. But first, I saw Brother Che, you had your hand up, brother.
Yeah,
I'll give you
Oh, I'm
opportunity. Go
sorry.
ahead.
yeah. First of all, we need to understand one thing, that as you enter prison, you're totally stripped of all your humanity. You're totally stripped of all your rights as a human being. You are no longer a human being as far as they're
Right.
concerned. You know, you are now considered a slave. You're now considered a number. And every time they call that number, you got to respond to it. In Attica, when we came out of our cells, they strip searched us. When we left the galleries to go to the mess hall, they searched us down, you know, and they used to bang once to stop and two to go. So you could imagine there was no communication between inmates. I don't know if that's the proper term, and guards. You know, I know the proper terms is pigs. So, you know, and listening to his experiences reminds me of mine, because I did 15 years in jail too, you know, and I know, you know, how it is to be in segregation, because that's where he experienced most of his stuff, in segregation. You know, I noticed one thing, that the prisons over there are a little different from the prisons over here. Not too much. I mean, prison is prison. Let's look at it that way. But there's certain styles of conducting that goes on in let me say, in his way, going up to Minneapolis, because I'm in New York. I don't know nothing about. I'm in New York, you know, and it was I could vision, you know, his education, you know, political education in prison, you know, because mine started with Malcolm X, when it was giving me a book to read on the autobiography of Malcolm X. Prior to that, I didn't know nothing. I was deaf, dumb, and blind, as the Nation of Islam calls us, deaf, dumb, and blind. And I was a 5%er for a while, you know, and then I became a Black Panther, and then I organized the first Young Law Party in New York State Prison, you know, but it wasn't easy. It's not easy. You have to go through trials and tribulations, you know, just to do the things you want to do, you know. But I just want to say, you know, basically that, you know, that it's a blessing, and I'm not putting it in no concept, but it's a blessing that he's out, you know, because a lot of people like myself who waged a lot of struggles in prisons, you know, they almost killed us. I'm quite sure they almost killed him, and they also attempted to kill me. Remember, I'm an Attica brother, so that's within itself, you know, says a lot. You know, says a lot. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sister.
we appreciate you, you know, sharing your experiences, because, you know, it can't be easy, you know, to relive those kind of moments. So yeah, we appreciate you sharing that. Um, One of the things that I really took away from chapter 13, which is entitled "Me Against the World," and I loved how he finished out with that statement as well. Uh, Brother Kwame couldn't be here with us today, but he had shared, you know, basically the "Me Against the World" statement is colonized in and of itself, you know, like it's very, you know, individualistic, you know, but you know, I know for me, I'm a big Tupac fan as well. And when I hear the song, you know, it seems empowering, you know, to say me against the world, you know, but you know, we understand as revolutionaries that on our own we're doing nothing but surviving, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, so but one of the things that we had talked about also, um, because he did say that this chapter, you know, really captured his mind state at his most criminal mentality. And so we talked about, you know, the criminal mentality being a colonized mentality, you know, that we have to go to the root of the mindset, and it comes from being colonized and oppressed. You know, he talks about,
Right.
you know, some of his experiences that he had where you know, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, you know, where you get this illusion of power almost by oppressing other people. And you know, who do we oppress? We oppress each other, we oppress our children in our homes, we oppress, you know, our community. And so uh, there was also a distinction that we made where we talked about colonized people being subjected to these oppressive material conditions, um, where you are in survival mode trying to meet basic human needs, you know, food, healthcare, shelter, and things like this. And so people will do what they have to do innately to meet these needs. But there's also a chapter in the book where he talks about, you know, getting some sense of satisfaction or pleasure or some sort of immediate gratification and false sense of power, you know, inflicting violence and re-victimizing others as well. You know, whether it be lying, stealing, you know, just these different sorts of things that you do for personal gain, and also coming out of the trauma-based responses that this sort of violent colonization, you know, tends to breed in us, you know, so that it's not just a matter of survival, but it's also what we do with those emotions that come from being cheated. You know, he talks about losing, you know, time of his life. I'm sure Brother Che, you probably feel the same way, you know, being cheated, you know, out of years of your life, you know, time that you will never get back. So that was a part that we touched on. And then towards the end, we also got into a conversation about unity, and unity not being um, it's a means, but it's definitely not the end. It doesn't stop with that. You know, we start with unity. We have to come together as a people, and then we talked about the value and the role of the vanguard, you know, political parties, the needs for organizations, you know, and political education. So those were two things that really stood out for me.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see, Sister Letty, who else is on here. I don't think
It
there was.
looks like there's just 6 of us here.
Yeah, I was trying to see if there was anyone else that was also on the last study group. See if anybody wanted to interject, but I
Well,
think that was it.
if I may, even though I wasn't here, I kind of get a feeling as to what you guys read. Of course, I'll go right back after this and reread the chapter. But it just touching on what Brother Chase said and what you said, it's almost you lose everything that you are. Everybody in I know this, my brothers, you know, I have multiple family members that have been locked up. And it takes that person from just not themselves, but from their family as well. You know, my brother, with 7-8 years ago, was such a different person. When they come out, you have to be a certain type of way to survive in that type of environment. They don't make it easy, you know, it's setting you up for failure. You know, they put you in a situation where it's a dog eat dog type of situation. And you can't be the chihuahua running around in a yard full of pit bulls. It doesn't work that way. You won't make it home to that family, you
Right.
know, and it just, it's disheartening. And it's always bothered me just hearing, you know, just even the way that Kwame has been treated. I'm sure, Brother Che, you weren't treated any better, you know. I'm sure they didn't have cupcakes for you for Valentine's Day, you know. And I think about these things, and it's, you know, it just makes you think all those phone calls, you know, is it gets sometimes you're, man, it's annoying, they're calling again, but those are their only outlets. These are
Mm.
the only way that they can have any type of feeling towards that little ounce of freedom anymore, towards that love, because there is no love in that type of environment. There is no caring. There is, I'm going to be the survivor. And if you're in my way to get me to be the survivor, then you're going to be moved out of my way by one way or another, you know. And it just, it forces these men and women, when they go into an environment like that, to, you have to become almost what they want you to be, which is inhumane. You have to become a different type of person. You almost have to become almost robotic to know you can't cry, you can't miss your mom, you can't miss your brothers, you can't miss your sisters, or your aunts or your uncles or your grandma or your grandpa. You know, you can't miss these people because it's emotion. And there are people in there that feed off of that emotion, and they will just eat you alive. And I've seen it time and time again, just our brothers and sisters coming home, and that love, it's hard for them to build that bond again and to build that trust, because it's a constant watch over your shoulder to see, even when you're out of that environment, just to see that you're going to be okay, that you're around people now that want nothing but the best for you, but you've been so long in that mentality that it's a shock. It's a mental shock, it's a physical shock, you know, it's an environmental shock, it's an emotional shock for these men and women to come home, our brothers and sisters, and just have to all of a sudden be expected to give thousands of hugs and make thousands of phone calls and get back to work and just do these things. There's just mannerisms that are no longer, you know, no longer there. And so, you know, I feel like it's up to us as well to welcome our brothers and sisters home and understand and be compassionate to them when they do come home, that, you know, it's a huge adjustment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of adjustment, you know, when I after 15 years and I came home, you know, and some of the people, being who I am, you know, people used to take me out to dinner and stuff like that. And will you believe that I was so adjusted to that type of environment that I would take my I would take my spoon and knife and fork, and I would walk with it like if I'm going out to the restaurant. And the comrades would tell me, where'd you go with that? I said, oh God, I gotta readjust here. But it's not easy. It's not easy. It took me a long time, you know, and even though, man, I was a revolutionary, but I was on my P's and Q's. You know, I was always looking at people, man, and looking at them, and I was saying, is he for real? Is that real or is that bullshit? You know, because I was accustomed to my little group of people, you know, in prison. Everything else is my little people, and coming out to the world and looking. Listen, when I used to look up in the sky and I see a plane, do you know that I would get frightful? Because remember in Attica, the helicopter came in and dropped that tear gas. You know, that itself have impacted a lot of brothers throughout the years. Because when they look up and see a plane or something or a helicopter, they get frightful. You know, they get very scary. And for a long time, it was, you know, I used to have nightmares. You know, I couldn't believe it, man. You know, I mean, today, man, you know, I've been out so long, and I'm adjusted, you know, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It's like me going to, let's say, Germany let's say Germany. Everybody, oh no, not even that. I went to Canada. I was in Canada, you know, for a little while, and I was learning the French language, but it wasn't easy, man, because I had to talk to people. People talk to me so fast in French, and I didn't know, you know. So it's like a new environment, and that's what it is when people come home. It's a new environment, a new way of life, you know.
So I got a quick question to ask, especially for our Comrade Elder Jed. What kind of prison reform program would you recommend from experience the horror living in prison where there's overpopulation, there's denial of human rights, where you are stripped, as you say, of everything except for a number that you have to know and answer to. What would you recommend or you want to speak on concerning proper rehabilitation services in regarding to our brothers and sisters who are behind the wall?
You honestly want me to answer that?
Go
Oh,
right
he gonna
ahead.
give it. He gonna give it to
First
us.
of all, Attica, as an example, and I have to use this part of the world. I can't talk about your part of the world, but this part of the world, Attica was built. You know why? Because of numerous rebellions throughout the prisons in the 20s and in the 30s. So they built Attica and they call that a reform prison. They call that a reform prison. But look how it turned out. From a so-called reform, look how it turned out. Barbaric, torturous. I don't believe in reform. I don't. Prisons should not be reformed. They should be destroyed. You know, and first of all, you need to understand the very nature that drives people to crimes.
Right.
We live in a very hostile environment. Capitalism creates environments for for people to become who they become. Capitalism creates this.
Right.
Yes.
You know, so for me to say, well, let's reform this prison and take these people, you know, and try to rehabilitate. You can't really. There's no such thing as rehabilitation. Not in prison. I don't care how nice you may look, you know. But look, after Attica, what they did, they came along with some so-called reforms. You know, they changed little pieces and here and there. But once they found out, once everything was adjusted, they took all the rights away, all the little rights that people have earned. You know, so you know, as revolutionary, we need to understand that prisons are concentration camps. That's what they are, concentration camps. They are not institutions to rehabilitate, to reform. None of that stuff exists. There's no such thing as reform. There's no such thing as rehabilitation. What we need to do is to destroy them. And and there's a movement right now in New York trying to get close down Attica. We need to stop closing these prisons down, man. We need to stop closing them. Because the war itself, the war that surrounds the prison, it tells you what it means. Keep people out while they do their thing inside. A lot of murders, a lot of crimes have been committed inside those walls, but people don't know nothing about it. And yet people pumping money, taxpayers' money, pumping into these prisons, thinking that they're reforming people. They're not reforming people. They're creating crimes. You know, they put me in segregation and they beat me up. They almost killed me a few times. They put me in once and holds me with water, with cold water, to the point that I almost died. And of course, they thought I was religious, so they said they brought a priest in there, and I said, "What you gonna do?" He said, "I'm gonna pray for you." I said, "No, don't pray for me. Please don't pray for me. Pray for somebody else, not for me." But that's neither here or there. But we need to get away from this whole concept of we have to find a way. That's just like trying to find a way of reforming the police. The police cannot be reformed.
Absolutely.
There wasn't structure for that. They were only structured to be servants of the capitalists. That's it. And if you know the history of the police, then you know that during slavery, during the time of slavery, what were they doing? They were booty hunters, man. They call them booty hunters. Is that what they call it? Is that proper term, or bounty hunters, something like that?
Bounty, but booty is correct
Bring
because
back
that's the
slave,
pirate.
the brothers and sisters who ran away from slavery. They used to bring them back, and that out of that history came forth the police. But anyway, I hope I said enough.
No, you said exactly everything, where it all comes down to capitalism. Because when you are in a situation where you have to survive, you're going to find every means possible to doing that.
Exactly.
And, Brother Kwame say, it's not so much of the money, but no, it's the condition that's all structured. Even with prison, all of it is a structure, all of it is branched of capitalism, where you have to survive, and some people don't understand where you have police officers or law enforcement officers who don't know anything about the community that they're working in, and feel that there's one way to answer to correcting a situation they think is wrong, and is through arrest, and is by also through torturing people, also beating them down, like you say, brother. And there's nothing about reform concerning that. And it just comes down to three things out of the system that have many people to try to survive, and that is those who want to be in dominance of others and those who are under the dominant rule. And it just comes down to, conquering, controlling, and destroying. And this is going to continue to be the same thing until capitalism self-destruct, which it eventually will do that. So I agree with everything you said. And, again, what you had pretty much summed up is exactly what, I have, gathered from chapter 13, which I can leave with, where you have to search for yourself or what you need to do, not only to survive, but what your role or your purpose is in life.
That's the bottom line, sister.
Yep. Anybody want to add on?
Beautifully put by both of you. We have to remember, these are, like I don't know if you guys seen the comment that I put, but I mean, most prisons, they're privately owned. It's just a cash cow for them. It's nowhere to, as you said, there's no reform. They're there to do cheap labor, make license plates, not get paid for it, they're not there to get well fed. Everybody, oh, well, they're alive. They got 3 hots and a cot. It doesn't matter. You can be alive, but you can be barely alive. I mean, there's been so many instances. I mean, we have how many right now that are on a hunger strike just for fair treatment, just to be treated like a human being. We've got hunger strikes all over the country. We've got, I don't remember. Alabama, the gentleman from Alabama where he had this surgery. The doctors just released him right back into the prison. He ended up with gangrene. And it took one of the other prisoners risking their privilege, sending a sister of his a message, a photograph. Hey, you need to come and check on your brother, man. He's not doing well. The man was, I mean, went from a full-grown healthy, I don't know, a full healthy man to me, 100
Mhm.
180 pounds or so. This man was about as big as my 11-year-old child.
Wow.
But you know what, sister? Like you said, um, by looking at the prison system, same thing with you, Comrade Elder. It's a prosperous as well as a marketable business where the rich are gaining money from this and don't give a damn about the people that's involved in that. Of course, healthcare is out the window. You know, you can sit there and pretty much die. Is like a death sentence of its own. And I have mentioned, you know, about the amount of money that the prison system has accumulated, and yet our country is broke. And we look at the prison system, and there's like to house over 1,000 prisoners is costs $14 trillion, that the over that amount in which the prison system are making, you know, all over the country. And you wonder why we don't have money, because these private owned businesses are running it, you know, as you say. And I know the family of those who are detained is spending so much just to make sure there's money on the books. And then there's thievery or theft where money that's supposed to be on somebody's book is not there, or they can't spend it. So, you know, it is so much corruption within, you know, a system that's supposed to be of correction, you know. And I just cannot believe the amount of money that's going into these prisons and being and profiting off of these, off of the people who are there, like a funeral business. You know what I'm saying? So it is so crazy. It is crazy. Trillions of dollars that's there to house these prisoners. And they are treated so inhumane. So, you know, when we look at our amendment, you know, yes, 13, 14, 15, they need to be amended. They need to be challenged, because slavery have not ended when it's coming down to incarceration. It's inhumane, and it should not be part of the amendment. But then again, what is the amendment when it was never designed for Blacks or indigenous people? Black power.
Thank you, sister, so much.
Mhm.
Were you going to say something, Brother Che?
Yeah, I was gonna say very briefly. For when somebody tells me what should we do, I said, well, what we should do is this: talk to your local politician and talk to your community. Those are the ones who pay taxes. We pay taxes all the time, and we don't even know where our money's going. We need to begin questioning that. And the first thing we need to do is to go into these prisons and investigate it thoroughly. Before we talk about reform, let's investigate it thoroughly, because I'm sure that once you've investigated thoroughly, you ain't talking about reform.
Right.
You ain't talking about reform. You talking about putting the police in jail.
And I believe that. There's so much corruption.
There's so much corruption in the prisons, it's ridiculous, man. And now they pump it with all kinds of stuff, pacification programs. And now you see people walking in the yard with a syringe in their hand. I can't believe that, a syringe. And they're getting ready to do their thing.
Yeah.
In the yard.
Matter
And
of
police
fact,
don't say nothing. Why? Because this is a
can't find
method of stabilizing and controlling people. As long as you high, you ain't thinking about revolution.
mhm,
You ain't
Right.
thinking
you're
about, conditions in the prison. Your condition is okay. As far as you get your needle or your reefer or your coke, it's okay. And the
Mm.
television is okay. So all these things are pacification just to keep us down. And so, we got when we talk about prisons, we got a rough job to do. It's a hard job. It's not easy.
yeah. And I understand there's a big lawsuit going on. I forgot what prison where a lot of female detainees were taken advantage of. It is so many sexual abuse behind bars in which those victims were not even heard. I mean, they try to bury it, and that's something that we need to also look into. As you say, brother, it's just amazing. So much on the outside that's inside from drugs, all types of contraband, and is inappropriate behaviors from those correction officers who's supposed to be doing their job, but having all these kind of relationships that's going on inside to fill their fetishes and their desires, and it's just horrifying. So it's like what you say, what can you do when there's no such thing as reform? It does not exist at all. It's more of a restraint, being restrained, and I'm glad that Brother Kwame just opened our eyes, or his readers' eyes, which I recommend everyone who is out there and will look at this video, please just read this book and
Yes.
share your view of what our brother had been very raw, very to the point, and letting us know this is was have taken place during my experience there, and it's something that's still in existence.
Beautiful. I think that is a great lead right into chapter 14, Sister Anna, actually, which is Kwame's experience on the Indiana State Prison.
Mm-hmm.
So if everybody's good, we'll go ahead and get started. So we actually, so we have some time to discuss afterwards as well. Okay. So chapter 14, the Indiana State Prison. As soon as I had arrived at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana, I was escorted to D East, which housed mostly administrative segregation prisoners. I was placed in cell 301 on 300 range for about a week or two before they moved me to the 400 range and placed me in 415. The D East side had 5 tiers, which we referred to as ranges, just like we did at Wabash. Every range had 33 cells. The top range was where they housed disciplinary segregation prisoners. The bottom range, which we referred to as the flag, was a mixture of prisoners. A number of them were solid, while the rest were either mentally ill prisoners who couldn't adjust to a regular range, or they were just check-ins who had left one of the ranges voluntarily out of fear. There were many reasons why those sort of individuals would check in. Either they owed someone money, they had snitched on someone on their range had made them leave their range for one reason or another, they were a sex offender, or they were just cowards. Very few of us wanted to be on the range on the flag. I damn sure didn't. The biggest difference that stood out to me when I arrived on D East was that they allowed us to come out with other prisoners during our recs and showers. Since every range held 33 prisoners, each one had 3 rec groups of 11 guys who would come out together all the time. They would rotate the rec groups where we would go outside to a fenced-in area one day, and then the next day we would rec inside this fenced area that was practically stretched half the length of the cells on the flag. The only thing you could really do on those inside rec days was call your people on the phone, payphones that lined the bottom wall, talk to other guys who were in their cells on the flag, play cards, or work out. I did all of the above depending upon the day of the week. Since they only had 4 or 6 payphones that lined up the wall, we would have to wait till one was free to use. Normally, most of the guys on your range were considerate and didn't hog the phone time. Most of us couldn't afford to stay on the phone the whole time anyways. It took me about 6 months to fully adjust to being around people again. The 3 years I spent in solitary confinement on the SHU, besides the 35 days I was in general population, had greatly affected me physically, psychologically, emotionally, and socially. I wasn't the same person I was before enduring this form of torture. It's an hidden, unseen form of torture. I remember feeling a lot of social anxiety coming out of my cell during our recs and showers. When I found myself talking to someone, I remember for the longest feeling so self-conscious. It was hard to fully capture the disassociation that I felt during these social interactions. The very act of talking to someone else felt as if I was a third person witnessing the conversation as it occurred. Every word that came out of my mouth, I felt a strange disassociation from it. I had never felt a disunity between my voice and my body. I mean, I'd been associating with people throughout my entire life, but never had I felt as if my body and voice weren't deriving from the same self-conscious. I would be looking at a person as I talked to him the whole time. I would be overly self-conscious of how I sounded. The words that would be coming out of my mouth would be my own, but I felt an omnipresent disconnect between my words and the body it was coming out of for the first time in my life. The eerie thing about this was that I only felt like this anytime I found myself in social situations. But anytime I did, I would experience that disassociation all over again. I would stutter my words and feel my heart rate increase. I would wonder to myself if they too noticed the strangeness of my voice and could sense my level of discomfort simply talking to them. I would get the urge to end the conversation quickly and find solitude in my cell, but I would always fight against that urge because I wanted to be whole once again. I just didn't know how that would come about when it was my body and personality that was separated while appearing to be united as one. This was a scary time for me in my life. I remember feeling like myself was forever gone, and I would be forced to live in a body that I didn't fully identify as being me. My personality was inside of a prison while being caged within a physical one. I felt abjectly alone, feeling like I would forever remain in this state of existence. I forced myself to socially interact, even though I experienced a lot of social anxiety anytime I did. I remember one time trying to explain what I was going through to my mom and family during a visit I had with them. I don't think they really understood though. However, I started having conversations with other guys who had endured years on the SHU or MMC Supermax facilities, and they would disclose what they were currently going through, the same thing that I was, or they had gone through it previously. I felt a great relief talking to others who understood the quote unquote prison that I was currently in. I realized that I wasn't going crazy and could possibly emerge from it one day. I just had to continue forcing myself to socially interact in order for existence and personality to become one once again. Like I said, it took at least 6 months before I started to feel like myself. Years later, I would come across a book called The Law is a White Dog, How Legal Rituals Make and Unmake Persons by Colin Dayan. The fact that she was a professor in the humanities department at Vanderbilt University, and she was speaking about the adverse effects of a supermax solitary confinement, I figured I would be able to understand what they were doing to us by sending us away on those units for years at a time. Not only did I find what I was looking for, I saw how they used the laws and legal precedents to legalize this form of torture across the United States, despite it being in violation of international human rights laws. The sense of feeling a disassociation between my body and my voice, between my body and my personality, between existence and my personality. She referred to this as the depersonalization process that solitary prisoners endure. These are some of the torture techniques that the US had borrowed from the supermax prisons inside the US and started to employ against suspected terrorists at their Guantanamo Bay detention camp in Cuba. Think about that. What sort of torture technique is this that they employ on suspected foreign enemies in order to break them while regularly using it on so-called citizens who find themselves in prison on a supermax unit here in the US? These were some of the hidden things about this country that I started to uncover about the covert war this government was waging against the Black and brown population in particular, and against the lower class population in general. Because I realized in a very tangible way that this war was being directed at me and those around me, both inside and outside prison, due to our being at the bottom of this capitalist imperialist system, that awareness gave me even more cause to take up revolutionary politics. It was like every time I peeled back a layer of this society to view it microscopically or macroscopically, I began to see it for what it truly was. Being moved to a Michigan city was a blessing in disguise in more ways than one. I ran into a number of guys I knew from the street. There's nothing more grounding than to be around people who you knew from the streets and you had a history with. Coming across people you grew up with from childhood is like having family around to keep you sane and grounded. I never thought I would come across anyone from my neighborhood who was part of our GTC clique. But as unfortunate as that was under those circumstances, I was glad I did. We were on lockdown for something when I came out to take my shower and walked past his cell and noticed him. I kept walking towards the shower, but I was thinking to myself the entire time, nah, that can't be him. After the CO locked me in the shower and walked off, I started to play with the idea of one of my homeboys actually being locked up on the same range as me. I wished we had crossed paths again under different circumstances, but I figured it would be a beneficial thing to both of us if it was him. I couldn't wait for the CO to handcuff me and take me back to my cell so I could see if it really was him. As soon as the CO cuffed me through the cuff port, I ran back to that cell to verify if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Man, is your name Lee Scarborough? I said, staring at this familiar face that I hadn't seen in 5 or 7 years. Dan? He said with a bright smile on his face. Damn, I said, smiling ear to ear. I thought that was you. We didn't get a chance to talk long since we were still on lockdown and the CO was rushing me back to my cell, but I knew me and Lee would definitely pick right back up where we had left off since the last time I had seen him on the streets. As soon as I got back to my cell, I yelled down to him and we walked over the range for about a good 30 minutes. The cells at Michigan City had bars that covered the front of the cell, so it was even easier to converse with someone who was several cells away. That night, I went to bed feeling like I had been reunited with a long-lost brother. Out of all my guys from my neighborhood that I grew up with, Lee was definitely one I knew I wouldn't mind biting with. He was a fighter and a no-nonsense type of guy. When you called his friend, he was 100% loyal to you. If you had a beef with anyone, that beef would become his beef as well. I didn't know what to expect to have to deal with while I was at that prison. I just knew that having one of my most loyal guys on the same deck with me would be a force to be reckoned with if it came down to it. I wasn't really into beefing with other prisoners unless you were a snitch or a child molester. But you never know what you may find yourself involved in. It was always good to have people around who you knew would have your back and vice versa. When we got off lockdown and had a day on the range where they just gave us showers or the option to work out or talk to guys in their cells, which was normally twice a week that they did this, he and I kicked it nearly the whole 30 minutes I was out. That's when I learned that his brother Clarence, who was now going by the name C. Murder, was doing time at Putnamville Correctional Facility. I thought it was crazy that nearly everybody in our GTC clique, besides my brother, had spent time at one of the Indiana prisons before any of us had reached the age of 30. It was as if a whole generation of Black males were finding themselves in the penitentiary at some point in their life. I recognized that the psychologist at boys' school was right about a lot of us ending up in prison in our lifetime. I remember when I caught my first bank robbery case, they were taking me back to my cell block after court one day. But before they did, they had wheeled me past the juvenile block. I knew everybody that came to that window of the juvenile block to see what was going on in the hallway. It was like they had relocated everyone from cottage 3 and 4 and put all those guys in the county jail. Since they were juveniles still, that meant that the juvenile court had waved all of them over to adult system. I'm not sure how many went on to prison, but I'm sure that most of them had. Throughout my whole time in prison, I would run across a lot of guys I had met in school. After a while, it became such a common occurrence, that I had gotten used to it. Since I had transformed my life into a revolutionary one, anytime they put one of those guys on the range with me, I would try to get them to start reading books in hopes that they would also adopt a revolutionary outlook on life as well. Does anybody want to read? Or are you guys okay? Okay. Visits from my family and friends had played such a big role in keeping me grounded that anytime I would get visits from my mom and sister, they would also go see Lee as well. The drive up to Michigan City was about 2.5 hours from Indianapolis, but we normally still got a visit from them every 2 weeks if we weren't on lockdown. I really appreciated them, not only for coming to see me on a regular basis after being down for a number of years and still being consistent, but for them to also visit Lee as well meant a lot to him. Over the few years we were on D East together, we really became close like blood brothers. Anytime he needed anything, I would try my best to help him and vice versa. To everyone else in prison, he was 7'1". He was 7'1". The name of the street our housing complex set on, but to me, he was my brother. One of the most important relationships I formed while I was in prison was with Angel Coleman. She was a friend of the family. Her brother John was doing 65 years for a case he had caught back in the mid-90s. He and I had been a few cell houses when I was down at Wabash. He and I had a close relationship, but the one that Angel and I had formed in the summer of 2003 in time became one of my closest relationships the remainder of my time in prison. Every month I would get several letters from her and I would write her often. I found her conversion very mature and validating. She had a nurturing way of addressing me and making me feel loved and appreciated. The fact that she would occasionally come and see me some of the times that my mom would come up made our friendship more than a pen pal thing. Oh, I just lost my place. Sorry, guys. I had a few women who would write to me and even a few that would come and visit me over the years. However, most of them would come and then eventually fade away. But the friend that remained constant throughout those years was my best friend, Angel. She helped me get through a lot of she helped me get through a lot of hard days and self-doubting moments. Apologize, guys. I knew with her I could be completely vulnerable and share my most intimate feelings that I wouldn't share with anyone else. She wasn't judgmental by far. She would just hear me out and give me nurturing advice. We would occasionally flirt with the idea of becoming more than friends, but we never crossed that line. I think one of the hardest things about serving time is not being able to interact with the opposite sex. For a man who is heterosexual, it's a void you crave to fill with love, intimacy, validation, affection, and acknowledgement that you can only receive from someone of the opposite sex. For a woman to show you that under those conditions, it's validating to you as a man. I remember on the shoe, I would have my entire imaginary conversations with my future wife. I would say stuff like, I don't even know your name yet, but I know you're out there. And when I find you, I'm going to love you completely. I'm going to adore you and cherish you for the rest of my life. I'm sure that some people have taken you for granted, but I'm going to show you what it's like to experience real Black love from a brother who wants to be that example to you in every way. I don't know your name, but I love you. Like I said, I would have whole conversations with my future wife. I would even set up whole scenarios about where I would take her out on a date to how I would mac on her initially to get her number. I found that validating in some ways. And even though this was all in my imagination, it was something I definitely wanted to find and appreciate whenever I got out of prison. I knew that once I found her, we would both know and never take each other for granted.
I can
I
pick
had
up
met a lot of,
this.
go ahead.
I can pick up.
Okay, sis, thank you.
I'm sure you're out of breath.
I need a little bit of water. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm gonna step and get.
Okay. I had met a lot of conscious brothers over the years that I had spent in prison. Most of them, like myself, had been criminals who had gotten locked up and had been given 40, 50, 60 or more years in prison, and eventually started to undergo years of self-education at some point. A lot of them had spent years on supermax units, and for the first time in their lives had started to search for answers. Many of our stories were similar, such as in how we turned to revolutionary politics and began incorporating those politics into our daily lives. I think of all the groups and individuals who had influenced individuals like me the most had been Malcolm X and the original Black Panther Party. By this time in my prison bit, I had read so many books that I had a nice library in my cell. Coming across other guys around my age who were on the same journey as myself, it was only natural that we started to come together and decide practical solutions that would help raise the consciousness of other prisoners inside with us. One of the creative things we came up with was the communal library we developed on D East. All the brothers on the various ranges who had a large selection of books wrote down a list of books that they had and were willing to make a part of the communal library. We then compiled the list and made it available to anybody who wasn't a snitch or child molester and wanted to educate themselves. I think the most popular book that a lot of guys selected out of my library was Asada, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. Assata's autobiography was one of my favorite books too. She was a Black Panther Party and Black Liberation Army member who had been a part of those movements and had gotten incarcerated behind an incident that had occurred on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973 that left a pig by the name of Werner Forrester dead. Even though she was hit during the shootout, which left her left dominant arm temporarily paralyzed, they had charged her with the murder of that pig, along with Sundiata Acoli, one of the other BLA members named Zaid Malik Shakur was killed during the shootout. By all evidence, that shootout was initiated by the pigs. While serving time for that case at Clinton Correctional Facility for Women, she was able to escape from that prison in 1979 with the help of a number of revolutionaries who helped break her out. She eventually fled to Cuba, where she enjoys political asylum to this day. Her story completely fascinated me the first time I read her book. Not only could I identify with her evolution into a revolutionary by documenting the various transitions in her life, I had learned a lot about this capitalist imperialist system and why socialist revolution was the only solution for the oppressed Black population in particular, as well as the lower class in general. Her account of how the Civil War had nothing to do with freeing Black people from slavery out of some moral concern, but rather was a war to decide if the capitalist ruling class or the slave-owning ruling class would control the direction of the US rang true. I had already read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, who was the so-called godfather of capitalism. Even in his own book, he had explained that chattel slavery was an inferior socio-economic system compared to capitalism and would eventually have to be replaced by it. A lot of the books I had in my possession were books about the original Black Panther Party. Even though I had started to consider myself a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, I recognized most Black people wouldn't enter revolutionary politics through white or even Chinese revolutionaries who they couldn't directly identify with in an immediate sense. They would have to learn about the legacy of the Black Panthers here in the United States. And then, and only then, could they venture outside of the parameters of the US borders to discover where the Panthers got their ideological method of approach and world outlook from. Anyone who doesn't realize this fundamental truth about the Black community is either naive or still blinded by their myopic ethnic centralism. This later point or latter point is something that Eurocentric, Marxist, Leninist, Maoists must come to understand, or they will never be relatable to the Black population. In a country that has been infused by white supremacy on every level and throughout every social institution, Black people are very distrustful of anything dressed in white who claims they will bring us salvation here in heaven or on earth. At least that was what I was seeing from the brothers in prison who had begun searching for answers within the pages of books. I was one of the few communists I had come across in prison. Most brothers were either Black nationalists or cultural nationalists. Some of them expressed it through religion, such as those who embraced the Nation of Islam. Others were contemporary Garveyites, some through the Moore Science Temple, which was a mixture of cultural nationalism with religion, while others were Black Hebrew Israelites. Then you had those who were Black nationalists who embraced the five-state solution advocated for by the Republic of New Africa. Occasionally, you would come across the New African communists who were a combination of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and the ideas of the Republic of New Africa. I was able to find a lot of points of unity with the latter group of guys more than any of the above, besides those who viewed themselves as modern-day Black Panthers, as I did. But one thing I realized by those years relating and dialoguing with the conscious sector of these brothers behind the wall was that identity politics would be the greatest hurdle for our people. I wouldn't say this was exclusive to the Black population of prisoners because it actually affected the whole prison population to one degree or another. The Aryan Brotherhood and Aryan Circle were the extreme fascist forms that identity politics and nationalism took upon, while most guys and groups fitted on the spectrum of nationalism, where it was often hard to get guys to truly embrace a class consciousness that transcended the social concerns of their own ethnicity. It wasn't that they were necessarily racist, because most viewed racism as a part of the problem. They just couldn't get past viewing the problems that affected the Black community from a Black-centered lens that was often devoid of a class analysis that would have helped them to view the same issue holistically. Subsequently, that limited many guys from seeing who their natural class alliances really were. Black people alone can't achieve Black liberation. We need allies, and to build a united front against capitalist imperialism to accomplish that. Besides, I had already started to view Black liberation as a means to an even greater end, human liberation. That was one of the most significant lessons I had learned from the original Black Panther Party. They said we weren't trying to fight racism with racism. We had to fight it with solidarity. They said we couldn't fight capitalism with Black capitalism. We had to fight it with socialism. Ultimately, though, we were fighting for a communist world without class antagonisms, racism, sexism, and all the isms that divided the human species against itself. In all actuality, there was only one race, and that was the human race. White supremacy had just done a marvelous job in preventing us from seeing that. Sometimes when I would sit back and really think about the world we were fighting to bring into existence, I would try to imagine what the people in that communist future would actually think about our period in human history. When we look back at our ancestors and laugh at their ignorance and how unscientific they were, we often overlook our own ignorance and unscientific conclusions we reach today. It is crazy now to think that many of them actually believed the earth was flat, or that the bubonic plague was due to sin and murdered scores of Jews behind it. Today, most of the people, those with rational common sense, know that the earth is not flat and that bubonic plague came from the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which came from the fleas that were on the backs of rats. It makes you wonder what they will think of us and how we use pseudoscientific ideas such as racism, sexism, and homophobia to divide our species. I would sometimes wonder what they would think about how capitalism nearly wiped out our species with endless wars just for some imperialist countries to be able to dominate and to control other oppressed countries. I would often imagine what they would think about our social economic system compared to the one they will have been born and raised in. I imagine them feeling the same way as we view today the time period of transatlantic slave trade in the United States and around the world, with utter disgust and disbelief that such a thing could have ever occurred. We all know it happened because we've read about it, watched movies and documentaries about it, but still, it just seems so surreal that people had actually been forced to endure it. It seems so crazy that people truly believe that that was ordained by God, and that many white people truly believe that they were a superior species in relation to us. Some still act as if they believe that today, but that is a dying idea while they keep it alive in objective ways in practice, though. Nevertheless, whenever I contemplated and thought about what the future communist world will think about us, it would cause me all the more to want to be a person who they could point to and say that I was someone in my lifetime who bucked against the lunacy of my own time, even when it was unpopular to do so. Because I read a lot of books, I eventually came across a poem that I adopted as my creed that became a major influence in how I did my time. That poem was Invictus by William Ernest Hensley. That poem resonated with me so much that I got Invictus tatted down my left back arm and Soul tatted down my right back arm. I still believed in God. I would say I went from being a Christian who believed in the personal God from the Bible, who would occasionally intervene in human affairs, to be a deist who viewed this God as just being the first cause to the material world, but never intervened into human affairs. I think my studies of yoga, Buddhism, and the Egyptian mystery schools of thought, excuse me, along with my studies into metaphysics, caused me to evolve into that direction once I left my Christian faith behind. I even wrote a piece around this time titled Dialectical Metaphysics, since I was trying to resolve the contradiction between my recognition of both dialectical materialism and a deist God. However, the more I began to probe the question of God and study dialectical materialism, I found myself becoming more agnostic in my world outlook on this subject. If you would have asked me at this period in my life, if I believed there was a God, I would have admitted that I didn't know. That subject was a question mark. That's why William Ernest Hensley captured my feelings about life so accurately at this juncture. In that poem, he said, "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried out aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." Besides setting up a communal library on D East, a number of us had gotten together and established a pact that we would begin taking back control from the prison. One of the ways we were going to do that was start purging snitches and child molesters from our rec groups. Anytime we found out someone was a snitch or child molester, we would give them the opportunity to check in and be moved down to the flag, or we whipped their ass and forced them off our ranges. For about several months, a number of snitches and child molesters were being either forced to check in or got beat up and forced off our ranges. We didn't have every rec group on board with us, but as long as we had one guy who had signed into the pact, we had at least one enforcer to carry out the new law of the land. I think one of the most indelible incidents was a guy who had made one of his gang members stab himself. When the police came up and observed him lying in a pool of his own blood, they moved him off the range. The guy personally liked this particular individual, but he learned he had snitched on someone. Instead of him doing it himself, he went into his cell when the rec doors opened and gave him the knife. After he stabbed himself wherever he wanted, the brother left the cell. This particular guy was high ranking in his gang and had a lot of clout in the prison, so the dude complied. When the guards came around to check cells, they found the dude lying in bloody sheets. They ended up locking down that rec group for that incident. The guy who stabbed himself was moved off the range to a check-in protective custody unit, but he never told on anyone, so no one was sent to lock up for that incident. I think he was trying to rehabilitate his image in the eyes of his street organization. That was the most extreme case. Most were forced to leave without any violence, which is what I preferred. I felt that if someone left after they were confronted, that would be in the best interest of all parties, even the snitch or the child molester. The way I saw it, it wasn't about handing out punitive sanctions against them. I'm sure a number of them had already been beaten up before behind the shit they had done while in prison or on the streets. I personally just wanted us to take back control from the prison regime so we could start rebuilding a new revolutionary culture that would be concerned with developing well-rounded revolutionaries. As we work towards that goal, we would then be better equipped with confronting the conditions that we were all suffering under. We wouldn't be able to do that with the population of prisoners who would sell us out by bribes from guards or who simply use snitching as a way to get rid of their competition on the unit. Some of the biggest snitches in prison were ironically some of the drug dealers in there, as crazy as that may seem. Once they got their competition out of the way, they would have a monopoly on the weed, tobacco, or cocaine market. There were even guys that would sell drugs for drug rings that several of the high-ranking prison guards ran. This came out years later when the FBI or state police raided the prison, and several of them ended up resigning over it. This lieutenant by the name of Batchelor was probably the most notorious one that lost his job behind the drug ring he ran. He had a number of these snitches under him who rarely did long segregation time. He would always make sure that he got them off of lockup and back to general population. I knew he would eventually have to do something about guys selling cocaine and heroin, but I figured that would be more plausible once we start transforming the prison's population consciousness and the culture inside prison. Starting on administrative segregation, I figure would be the start of this arduous process that would take years to fully accomplish. After having to direct others to purge snitches from our ranges, I found myself in the position where I had to take matters into my own hands. They had placed this guy on our range who not only started snitching on any and everything, but he started to quote unquote borrow shit from people with no intentions of giving any of it back. For a while, he got away with it because he placed himself on self-check-in on our range where they wouldn't roll his door for rec anymore. We decided to leave him alone since everyone on the range stopped fucking with him altogether. I guess he got comfortable and relaxed, thinking things would go back to normal because on this particular day, they took him off of red tag status and rolled his door with the rest of us. Before our rec period had ended, I ended up dog walking his ass with one of the worst ass whoopings I had ever put on someone. Unfortunately, the guards caught me on camera, so I was subsequently sent to disciplinary segregation for it. And that is the end of chapter 14.
Wow.
No, I just want to say, I mean, in New York State prisons, it was totally different. You know, we didn't deal with snitches. You know, as an example, you know, the snitches were isolated from the general population most of the time. If you was a snitch, they would take you and isolate you. So we didn't have problems with the snitches. You know, I just, we just didn't, you know, and not to say that they wasn't, but,
Mhm.
you know, we knew who they were and they knew who we were, you know, and as long as they know who we were and we knew who they were, it was okay because they would stay the fuck away from us as far as much as possible, you know, and even the white people, the white prisoners, you know, they had their own little cliques. They didn't allow snitches into these cliques, you know. So I mean, I don't know. Those prisons over there is a little different from ours over here. We don't play over here. We don't, you know, and that it's very strict. It's very strict. You come out your cell, you get searched. You leave the gallery. We call it galleries. You get searched. You go to your visiting, you get searched. You leave the visiting room to come out, you get searched. You get searched practically everywhere you go. And I said that to say this, that even in the visiting room, we would get the information as to who was a snitch. So we was always you know, keep them under our eye. And people, you know, snitches never came around us. They never came because we didn't want them around us anyway. You know, so we never had that problem with that.
Brother, do you see that as kind of a strategy, the way that it's you know, outlined here in the chapter, where, you know, if you can keep people that do this sort of thing amongst the general population, you can use them, you know, where the guards are using them to cause further disruption, or, you know, just different things that they, you know, they're kind of the dispensable people that'll sell out that way. Do you
Yeah,
see it that
yeah,
way?
yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, Attica jumped off because, and I hate to say it like this, but Attica jumped off. You know why? Because there wasn't no snitch.
Well, right.
There wasn't
Okay,
no snitch.
that makes
The
sense.
whole 1,200 people just came together like that,
Mm,
formulated one family.
mm-hmm.
You know, and so this is one family, which meant that you don't see nobody. There was nobody there black. There was nobody there brown. There was nobody there yellow. Everybody was one family. You know, and you know, later on, I must say there were some snitches that turned out. You know, and 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 uh, and they claimed that two prisoners got killed during the whole rebellion because they were
Mm-hmm.
sick, you know. But there was more to it than just that, you know. I'm not gonna go into it, but
Mm-hmm.
more to it than just that, you know. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, yeah, and they always utilize people like that to get information, because as long as
Mm-hmm.
as long as white people stay like that and black people stay like that and Latinos stay like that, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can have nobody snitching on us, you know, and that's, you know, that's the bottom line, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's definitely interesting. Because we understand that, you know, the conditions, the things that we see happening out here behind the walls are amplified uh inside the walls, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that when, because out here, I've never been to prison, but you know, I've heard stories. So on the West Coast out here, it's
You are in prison.
yeah, man, I tell you, all
You
these
are in
damn kids
prison.
and dogs, all
Remember,
this world we
there's a
live in.
physical prison and there's a
You're right,
mental
you're
prison.
right.
You are in
But
prison.
that leads to this, where you have there's so many different, there's a whole different set of politics, as it's
Yeah.
called. You know, there's a whole different set of rules. There's, when you go in, you know, you gotta like my brother said, there was you got to figure out who you're gonna run with, and I was like, what do you mean? What do you? And this is the first time he went to prison. You know, I'm like, what are you gonna like work out? What are you talking about? Run with, you know? And that was me being naive. You know, I didn't understand what programming was. I didn't understand the rules and regulations that are not just set by the prison system that they're in, but these are the rules and regulations that are set by the people that they hang around as well.
Yeah.
The Aryan Brotherhood will have certain rules. The Black brothers and sisters will have certain rules. Whether it be the La Onda or La M, you know, everybody's got their own set of rules, and it's to keep that specific group of people segregated from another group of people. And intentionally, I mean, the only similarity that I've ever seen between any of them are regarding sex offenders, snitches, people of that effect. Like, it is quote unquote a green light as soon as you see those people. They don't make it to the yard, they PC up as soon as they know what they're charged, because they know as soon as they hit that yard, man, they have to show their paperwork. They
That's
have to
right.
show their paperwork. They have to show what they're in there for. And if you're in there for anything like that, I mean, it just, from what I understand, it can get bad, you know. And
It could get worse, a lot of that.
yeah, you know, like, you think you're in there just to do some time and be away from your family. Well, those people that go in there, man, they're not going to be punished just once, you know. That's for as long as they're in there. They're, unless they decide, like Kwame said, to check in, you
Yeah.
know, they're gonna have a very either short time there or a very long, hard, alone time there.
Hmm.
I really liked how, you know, despite the conditions that they're facing in there, you know, this whole idea of this communal library, that was, you know, me being a big nerd, that just was so exciting to me, you know, just, you know, me growing up, you know, Brother Chad, like you said, you know, we all are imprisoned by different different conditions. And for me, in my childhood, I endured trauma of every kind, and reading was my escape. You know, I think it was either this last chapter or the chapter before that one where we had talked about, you know, Kwame was describing how what reading did for him, you know. And he wasn't, at that time, he wasn't really interacting with too many people, and I think it was the time that he was in the solitary confinement, so kind of, you know, not necessarily by choice, but, you know, forced, that solitude being forced on him, where the reading allowed him to have company, you know, in a way. Because when you dive into these books, you get to know the person who's reading, the characters and things like this. So you know, for me, that idea of the communal library where they come together and they share, you know, what they have with each other, you know, I thought that was pretty neat, that they, you know, they'd find, it just kind of speaks to the, you know, our resilience as a people. You know, we find a way, you know, we find a way to meet our needs and to help each other, you know, meet these common needs. But even something as simple as reading a book, you know, and just, for me, it just kind of put things in perspective for me, you know. And this happens for me all the time, as I know several people that are, you know, behind the wall still. And, you know, it's a different fight out here. It's the same, but it's different, you know.
Yeah.
And just those, you know, to hear somebody say, you know, I can't get no paper, you know, or a pencil or pen to put some thoughts down on paper. And even if I did, I may not do it, just for, you know, the fear of somebody finding my thoughts on paper. You know, things like this, you know. Yeah, that was something that stood out for me, was that idea of the communal library.
You know, let me say this. You know what separates us from prisoners?
Hmm.
The walls. That's the only thing.
Yes. Hmm.
You know, because in reality, they live the life that we living out here, as quiet as kept. You know, there's no difference. with the struggles that they go through every day, it's the same struggles we go out here every day. It may be worse out here than in there in a lot of instances.
Mm.
You know, because I mean, if you ain't got a job, you what happens? You get all stressed out. You start thinking all kinds of crazy shit. You know, and if you're homeless, what happens? You know, so I mean, we gotta you know, keep in perspective. Yeah, but I don't see the difference between. Well, let me give you an example. When I was in prison and I was organizing the young laws, you know, one of the things that I used to do, I used to put two tables together, you know, and then I say, well, bring me a few people, man, you know, so I could talk to them about the history of Puerto Rico, Paviso Campo, all that stuff. And then other people, man, within the party, they will go do their exercises. Some people some people will do some meditation, some people will do physical military stuff. And you know, we all did different things. And out here it's the same thing. I don't see no difference when we everybody's doing different things to bring the organization together. You know, and so, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I know, brother, from because I'm definitely not going to argue with you because you have the experience on both sides.
Listen, you can't be my comrade if you don't argue with me. You need to argue with me because
now, I'll wrestle with you.
arguing with me will only make both of us stronger.
I got you, brother. Okay,
you know,
well,
critique is beautiful, man. That's like looking at my mirror. I check myself out in the mirror. That's a critique. You know, because I said, this is wrong, that's wrong. So when you argue with me, you just only helping me grow up further. So don't say, dude, you ain't gonna argue with me.
All right. Well, you know what? I'll go ahead and jump right into it then, because you're so right about that, brother. Thank you for that reminder. But I will say this. From my current and very recent experiences with brothers that are behind the wall, is that the you know, different types of so even some of the things that you mentioned, you know, have been taken away from them. You know, the ability to, you know, to lift weights. And I know people get creative behind them walls to do things such as exercise and stuff like that. But even like programs and stuff, you know, that at one point were there, like they're just not there, you know. And you had mentioned even a couple studies back too about, you know, like with technology, you know, a lot of the people behind the walls have cell phones now, and you know, a lot of the people are given even the tablets and stuff and internet access, which kind of gives them, you know, access to the outside world in a way. But I still see the restriction of it, you know, when out here, for example, you know, I might be going through, you know, a lot of stress as a, you know, I'm still here raising two young children. You know, I'm pretty much doing this on my own out here, you know, on a single income, and, you know, trying to work and then trying to keep up with my studies and, you know, different responsibilities and stuff. And when I get overwhelmed, it's like I got an array of different things that I can pick from to kind of de-stress and to try to bring some balance back into my life, where I see that, you know, for our brothers and sisters behind the walls, it's like, you know, the smallest things, the smallest of coping skills is just like, and activities is just like stripped from you. You know, we have prisons that are so severely understaffed that the survival deal is like a whole nother level, you know. It's a hyper vigilance upon hyper vigilance, you know, things like this. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, it really seems just exponential in there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You know, just the other day I was outside and I sat down. It wasn't too cold, so I sat down and I was reading a Marxist book. You know, because I'm always reading Marxism. And somebody came up to me, man, and said, "You a communist?" I looked at him.
They smelled it.
I said, "Do I look like a communist?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, why do you think I'm a communist?" "Because you're reading that book. So also, if I was reading the Bible, you call me a Catholic, huh?" If I was reading the book, the Bible, you would call me a Catholic. He said, "Yeah." And so you're calling me a communist because of this book. Okay, so let's discuss this. What is a communist to you? You know, he started telling me all kind of bullshit. I said, "Well, listen, you know something? With all due respect to your bullshit, that's what it is. Bullshit, man. You've been fed so much bullshit that now you see somebody, you call them a communist. That's ridiculous." You know, before you criticize somebody, first investigate, because Mao talked about that. Investigate, and then you criticize.
Mm.
You know, but don't come and tell me I'm a communist. And he said, now that we getting close to each other, are you a communist? I said, yeah. I said, yes. He said, "But why?" I said, "Why? Are you a capitalist?" He said, "No." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because I don't like the system." "Also, you're a communist too." He said, "No, I'm not." "Yeah, you." Oh, man. We had a discussion, man. It was crazy. You know,
but like you said, he was willing to have the conversation with you, so it
yeah,
could
if
go
he would,
somewhere.
his wife came to get him, because if he would have stood with me, by the time he would have finished, he would have been a communist. I would have made him a communist.
That's
And he
what's
was
up,
my
brother.
age too. You know, so that would have been much better for me, because I'll whip his butt.
I love it.
Get it, brother. Yeah. Another thing too, when you hear we had some meetings a while back about communists. Are you a communist? Are you a communist? You know, and they have like this commie watch list online. They have all these things online. Put your picture on there, show your Facebook page, all these things. This person here's a communist. Be scared, you know. But if one doesn't fully understand communism, it's just like every other thing. Nobody, oh, I don't know what it is, so I'm scared. Hitler, these people are communists. Oh God, they're, you know, these people. Fidel's a communist. All these people are communists. We got to be scared of these people.
And
They're so scared they don't want to take in the knowledge and
that's something.
understand what's really going on.
And
Right.
that's funny, because a lot of people look at Hitler as a communist, but Hitler was never a communist. Hitler was a Catholic. He
Mhm.
was Catholic. A lot of people look at
Yes.
him, he's a communist. No, he's not a communist.
No.
He was a devoted Catholic.
Until the day
And-
he killed himself.
And you know, and if anybody here is by any chance have any Christian inclinations, please respect. Please, I don't mean to disrespect, but let me say this: I had an argument the other day with my son-in-law, because he walks around with a cross and he doesn't even know what the fuck that means. But he walks around with a cross, and then I asked him. I said, "Listen, man, let me ask you something." He said, "What?" He said, "Why you got that cross on?" "Oh, because I'm a Catholic." I said, "You are? Oh, wow. Did you know that the first criminals in history were Catholics? Did you know that?" I said, "The first people who brought slaves to this country were Catholics. Did you know that?" And he said, "No, I didn't." I said, "Yeah, but read it in the Bible. You might find it." It's crazy, man. Because I read so much, man. It's crazy. But
Brother Rafa, you look like you have some good to say.
yeah.
No, I apologize. I'm sick as a dog right now, but that's why I'm all stuffy and stuff. Because I've been listening, you know, just having a good time. But I'm gonna have to log off in a little bit, and you know, but just as far as chapter 14, and I do want to take it back to something that Brother Chair. It's always good to hear your voice. Something you said earlier about, you know, the being in prison and how the mind develops while in prison. And I'm an educator. I've been teaching for 23 years. and some of my students get out of these facilities, and when they come to me, they're still young and they're institutionalized. Yes sir, no sir, no ma'am, and it's a discipline that's pounded away at them. But at the same time, they're brainwashed. Well, with the little education that they do get at the school, the high school level. But what's interesting is, here we're talking about, communism, communism, and Hitler and things like that. But you're right. Communism is totally misunderstood, and I know I make sure to tell the students and distinguish between a communist and a fascist, which is what Hitler was, and who freed the Jews from the Nazis. It was Stalin and the Soviets. The communists, and it blows their mind, because I give them questions, just to see where they stand on some of these issues, and they're so miseducated. And anything good must be American, must be capitalist, must be rah rah, and I blow their mind with facts that they just don't know. And so I'm grateful to those of you who put in time in prison, and like you said, those of us who are here outside of this prison, or sometimes. I wouldn't say Letty is, or Veronica or Zamago, but a lot of our brothers and sisters, you're right. We're lost. It's worse out here, because they're catering to a system, trying to carry water for a system and apologize for a system. They'll never be a capitalist in to begin with. It's very few people actually are capitalists, even if you're wealthy. So I appreciate everybody's words tonight. But I'll be tuning in again. Hopefully I can speak better. But it's been a great discussion here, especially towards the end. Oh, and chapter 14 is kind of interesting in a sad way, because I obviously Kwame, and I read the book a while back. Kwame is going to go back, back to, I think it's a Hugh or something, but they're trying to govern themselves, and I think that's something we learn from our brothers and sisters on the inside. That are locked up. You're forced to govern, right, yourselves, and that's admirable, because some of us out here, like you said, we can't even get by without a day of being insulted on Facebook, and our world falls apart. So
true.
thank you all for the wisdom you shared today.
Let me say this, because you were talking about fascism. Have you ever seen a communist who's a fascist? I don't think so, right? They can't be a communist and fascist, but yet they could be a Catholic and be a fascist.
No, you bring up a very good point. As a history teacher, I make that point as well. I was raised Catholic, and a lot of people didn't know Hitler had a pact with the Catholic Pope, the church. If Hitler won the war, the Catholic Church would become the world religion. A lot of people don't realize that the Catholic Church was so instrumental in from the native genocide to slavery to you name it. And it's not just Catholicism, but today there's a big movement of white nationalist Catholics, and even the FBI had to come out and put out a warning just last week about them. I've been hearing about them for years, but they're latch on to the Roman, because Romans are the ones that did that whole salute that the Nazis and Mussolini did. They get that from the Catholic Church, and Christianity itself can be traced back to Africa. That's where where the Catholics took over. Things started changing with the look and the doings. But and I'm not religious myself. I'm like you, brother. I'm like Kwame, where you go through this journey and transformation, and all of a sudden you're agnostic, then you're questioning everything. So, but yeah, it's a good take there on the influence of the church, and even us Chicanos. We've been colonized so long that we treat our own families and upbringing with Catholic rituals that sometimes and expectations that really did harm to us, to our community as a whole.
Yeah. But I do have a religion though, and my religion is dialectical materialism.
I do want to point out, I think for me, going back to chapter 14, it was reading the moment and seeing the moment that Kwame realized that he's disassociated from himself, that you're no longer your own person, you're no longer mentally okay in the situations that he was put in. And it takes a lot of self-realization and self-awareness to get to the point of where you actually realize, like, wait a minute, this is not this is not me. This is not who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. I can't even figure out what's happening anymore, you know? And for me to see him lose himself, realize that he's lost himself, and come and find himself again and realize, wait a minute, I've got to do this. This is what needs to happen for me to find who I am again, and to realize and become not just one person, but one whole person again, one emotionally, mentally, physical whole person again. For me, that was really powerful.
Mm.
I agree, sis. And even, you know, the part there where they start looking at helping each other in that same need, you know, again, just going back to, you know, us being a communal people, you know, a relational people. We don't do things individually, you know, we just don't. We don't make it that way. We have to look out for each other.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct, sister. That's why, you know, I mean, that's why I have brothers and sisters more than just what I was born with. This is why, you know, it's either in you or it's not to help others. It's either in you or it's not to care about others. You know, it can be learned. Sorry, guys, the girls are fighting over homework, but you know, who gets to let the dog out and who doesn't? One moment.
The multitasking of parenthood.
Oh man, I tell you, who gets to open the dog for the door, or the door for the dog? You know, but
I have my phrases of that.
you know,
I
it
I
comes
got
to
two
you,
grown
you
ups.
know, my whole life I've felt like I didn't know what I was doing until I became a brown beret. I felt like I was
Mm,
always kind of lost. I didn't know what to do. I always felt that I should be doing more. I have more money. Let me go give more money to the homeless. I have more of this. Let me go do
mm,
this. And I was never satisfied. And I didn't become satisfied until I became a brown beret. And even now, I'm even more hungry. I'm even more less satisfied because now I see even more, you know, being raised Catholic. I just look at it and I'm like, God, man, what happened to me? Whoa, who was that? You know, and I never felt comfortable in the church. I never felt that it was for me. You know, I never felt represented in the church. I never felt that, okay, well now, you know, my mom's like, well, you're gonna have to get baptized. And I fought her. I never got baptized. I fought it and fought it and fought it and fought it, you know, until finally she was just like, all right, fine, you don't have to, you know, if that's not what you want. But it just, until I became an adult, and you know, my kids are almost grown and all of this, you don't realize, because I wasn't exposed to my ancestral history.
mhm,
I wasn't exposed to any of that. I taught myself Spanish. I had to teach myself about my people, and becoming a brown beret and learning like all these communal aspects that we really are is now where I feel that I belong. Now I feel that I'm where I'm supposed to be and helping the people in the way that I'm supposed to be helping the people. And it helps to identify with Kwame in that way, that now he knows during this chapter, like it's not just, I guess, him identifying and becoming one for himself, but to be able to become one for himself so he can help others become one as well.
absolutely. And to piggyback off of that, sis, on page 163 at the end, where he talks about um, identity politics being one of the greatest hurdle for our people, is that, you know, we do that. We end up catching ourselves in these you know, arguments or debates of, you know, identity. And he talks here about let me see here. He says it says they just couldn't get past viewing the problems that affected the Black community from a Black-centered lens that was often devoid of a class analysis that would have helped them to view the same issue holistically. And so for him, it says, I had started to view Black liberation as a means to an even greater end, which was human liberation. And that part right there, that really touched me. That was beautiful. We tend to get so tunnel vision in our own experiences sometimes that we can't see it through the bigger lens. And so while we're sitting here, arguing, I know for me, it used to be a big thing. If somebody said, the word Hispanic or Latino, it was just like, I just would be so offended by it, and I just didn't even want to talk to you anymore. We have to do better as a people. And if somebody chooses to call themselves Hispanic, so be it. That's where the person is at. I have lots of growth to do for myself as well. But that whole identity politics, that was one of the first things that was stripped of us, next to the land and the natural resources, is our identity. Who are we? Who am I? Who are you? Can I respect who you say you are? Or am I going to tell you who you are? I don't want nobody telling me who I am, So, and I love this, just yesterday I had a brother ask me, he said, he said, what do you identify as, sister? And it's a beautiful thing, that we come to a point where we start to understand that we're just not throwing labels on people, and that, everybody has their own search for answers, truth, and meaning. Just to kind of bring it full circle back to the title of the book.
What I hate to hear a Puerto Rican yell out, he is proud of being American. I hate that. I will get on it. I will get on him so quick, man. It's crazy. But I just can't help it. I just can't help it. That's the way I am.
We cringe. Yeah, we cringe, brother.
Yeah, I got to say something, man. Because and I've gotten into some arguments, because I just soy boricua, ¿me entiendes? And somebody that was born in La Perla in Puerto Rico, let's say, as an example, going to come over here and going to call himself an American and walk around with America, we shall make America good again, that kind of shit. That I just can't stand it.
Yeah.
I can't stand that, and I hear what you're saying about, the what they want to be, but we in our own little way, we have to try to reach them.
We do.
We have to try to reach them, because remember that there was a time in our life where we was there too.
Right.
We was there too. I mean, there was a time in my life, Malcolm X, who the, excuse the language, who the fuck is Malcolm X? I don't know no Malcolm X. But Malcolm X educated me. He opened up my eyes.
He's still educating, right?
Yeah, then it was only Malcolm X. It was Abiso Campo, and you have to go on and on and on and on and on. But it was good. It was a good journey, and we all stay on that same journey, And speaking of homeless, like because I'm a social worker. Well, I'm a retired social worker, but when I used to get paid, I used to go down to the village in Manhattan, and I used to see these people, man, eating out of garbage cans. And I used to go up to them, and I say, "You hungry?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Here." I give him $10. And then after a while, I stopped doing that, because I said to myself, would they really take this $10 and buy some food, or would they buy drugs or buy alcohol? So when I used to see some people, I should say, "You hungry?" "Yeah." "Come on with me." And I take them to a restaurant, and whatever they want to eat, they eat. you know, and that was my revolutionary way because, you know, I came out here, man, looking for, it was crazy. I was like, where's the revolution, man? I'm ready now. I'm ready. You can't put me in the cell right now like you used to. Now I'm out here, I can run from your ass. You know, and I've been in a lot of demonstrations. And some of them got a little violent. I had to get underneath a car just to make sure the police didn't catch me. You know, it was crazy, man. But it's all good, man. You know, all that is good, man, because you taught me everything we do in life around that revolves around our struggle. It just helps us grow more. It helps us grow more. But anyway, listen, sisters, I don't know if there's any brothers here, but listen, I gotta go.
Yes, thank you so much, hermano, for joining us. It's always an honor.
Hermanita, cuídate.
Gracias, hermano, gracias. Te lo
Cuídate.
agradezco.
Yes.
Y la
Thank you,
hermanita,
hermano.
la hermanita esa, ella habla español también.
Pues sí,
Pues sí.
claro que sí, hermano.
Adelante.
Hermanas, hermanitas,
Pues sí.
como yo hermanitas, you know, pues yo soy
Pues,
tu hermanito. You know,
I'll take it.
Adelante, hermano.
cuídense, pa'lante siempre. Like the young
Pa'lante.
boys say, pa'lante, nunca para atrás.
Adelante siempre,
pa'lante.
sí, claro
And
que sí.
recuerda, and remember, venceremos.
Venceremos.
Yes.
Much love to y'all.
Okay, que les vaya bien.
Okay.
All right, sister. Well, if we don't have anything else, I mean, that was a great chapter.
Every single one, sis.
Yes, yes. I know
Every
I've always
single
got so
one.
many things going on, and I was so honored when Lobo asked me to do the reading. So I was very, very happy about it. So I'm glad I got to be a part of it, you know, and the discussions are always amazing. Always amazing. There's never not a good discussion.
Agreed, sister. Agreed.
All righty. Well, I don't personally have anything else. Unless you do, I believe we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Absolutely. Sounds good, sister. All power to the people.
All power to the people. Que viva.
Que viva.
All right. I'll see you later.
Good night.
Good night.